My name is Sohail Akbar. I am an associate professor of photography at the AJK Mass Communication Research Center, Jamia Millia Islamia. Earlier we had talked about the coming of photography, its history and its cultural impact. Today I will talk more about a later version, which is the digital. Digital photography has now virtually replaced analog photography or film photography for the past 15 years. What is digital photography? Everything has become digital these days. It is not just photography, but sound recording, many other things, electronics have been taken away by something called digital. Similarly, in photography, the recording medium has changed. Earlier, during film photography, the recording medium was a photochemical plane, meaning it was a chemical surface which used to be impacted by the light, and there used to be a latent image, an image that used to be recorded, and then it had to be washed with chemicals to see what the image is. This has totally transformed. A new technology has come in. The photosensitive film has been replaced by a sensor. A sensor is a different technology altogether. A sensor is an array of pixels or what are called picture elements. They are like buckets which absorb light and generate voltage, which means they generate a sort of a current. They almost work like a solar panel. This current is the information that is stored and is later stored as a digital signal. So, what actually is happening on a sensor is that light is creating electrical voltage. This electrical voltage is actually mind you not a digital information, it is an analog information. This analog information in the form of an electrical voltage is then converted into a digital signal. A digital signal then is sent to a storage where the image is stored as digital information. It is the same as maybe when we record sound in a studio. The studio sound, when you record sound, the sound also is recorded as an electrical information, but is stored as digital information. The revolution that has happened is that digital storage is very compressible. In a small space you can store a lot of digital information. You do not need large tapes or large storage spaces to keep digital information. Therefore, the whole range of colors, the whole range of information is compressed and kept in what is called a storage card. So, what I want to clarify here, an image that is photographed on a digital camera is photographed on a sensor. The sensor captures light, converts that light into voltage. The voltage itself is an analog information. There is a device in the camera called the analog to digital converter. The analog to digital converter converts the electrical information which is analog into a digital information, and then that digital information is stored in the form of digital information in a storage card. So, what is the benefit of this digital information? As I said earlier, the digital information can be compressed or kept in a very small space. A lot of information can be kept, and when we need to see this information, it can be displayed easily on a screen. So, digital cameras are equipped, the heart of the digital camera is the sensor. Now, I will elaborate what a sensor is. A sensor is basically a silicon chip, which is, to understand in a layman's language, is a major grid of horizontal and vertically placed pixels. Pixels is the unit of the basic unit of light capture. As I told earlier, pixel means picture elements. They are like buckets. Just imagine a whole field with buckets in which water is stored. If I drop water at some spaces, in some buckets more water will be stored, in some buckets less water will be stored. This whole level, the whole capture of what I am trying to say, array of buckets capturing here light instead of water, gather this information. This information is then changed, is kind of converted into an electrical information. That information channels into the analog to digital converter, and that digital information, the analog information is now converted into a digital information. The digital information is stored as a series of bits. Now, one needs to understand what these bits are. Any information, any digital information is actually an array or a sequence of zeros and 1. A 2-bit information will be either 0 or 1, which means it can be on and off, it can be black or white. Basic information in digital cameras is an 8-bit information. 8-bit means 256 combinations or 256 states of colors, of shades. So, 8-bit means 2 to the power of 8. So, you can just to simplify, say if they can place 8 zeros one after another, 8 zeros may be a complete black information. 8 sequence of 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 will be a complete white information, and major sequences we can get from 0 to 255, or 256 shades of combinations of zeros and ones, which will give us all colors. Now, as we all know from our earlier knowledge that there are 3 primary colors: red, green and blue. Red, green and blue, if the information has a 0 to 255, which means 256 or 2 to the power of 8 byte information, that information in 3 stages, 256 of red, 256 of green and 256 of blue, if they all combine to create a whole band of colors. After all, our eye can also has a perception of seeing colors, or our eye gives a has a kind of a threshold of colors. 256 red, 256 green, 256 blue, all of them combine to create a whole range of colors. So, as I told you, sensor is kind of the heart of digital photography, that is the recording medium. The film has been replaced by the sensor. Now, sensor itself in various cameras comes in various sizes, and its structure or its resolution improves with the increase in the number of pixels. Pixels are the photo sites on which an image is made. There are many kinds of sensors now. As you can understand, the larger the sensor, the much better the image resolution. We are familiar with an information which everybody knows when one picks up a camera, that how many megapixels is the size of an image. There are cameras, when digital photography started, the first of the DSLRs, the digital single lens reflex cameras, were making 8 megapixel image, which was considered to be big. Then it improved to 10 megapixels, 14 megapixels, 24 megapixels. Now, the best of the DSLRs are making a 50 megapixel image. What are they? What is this? 1 pixel, a megapixel is equal to 1 million pixels, 10 lakh pixels. So, when an image is a 2 megapixel image, it has 1600 horizontal and 1200 vertical pixels. So, when you multiply 1600 by 1200, you get almost 2 million pixels. So, that camera which has 1600 horizontal and 1200 vertical pixels produces a 2 megapixel image. So, naturally a 2 megapixel camera now is a very small camera. Maybe most of our mobile cameras are like that on the mobile phone, but so you can imagine the density of a 50 megapixel camera. It will have many more pixels laid on its surface. It is not just the number of pixels, it is also the quality of pixels that determine the range of details that a camera can capture. A good camera will have an ability to capture details in highlights in the brighter side and details in the low light or in the darker sides. The whole range, and a good DSLR should capture details both in the darker side as well as in the brighter side. That will be possible only when the pixels themselves. It is like, again giving you the example of the buckets. If the bucket is shallow, soon it will overflow, but if the bucket is deep, it will record the least of the signal as well as more details throughout towards the brighter side. So, the size of the bucket or the size of the pixel itself is important. So, at times people get into this confusion that if a camera is advertised, and a lot of these advertising makes the fool of the consumers by saying that we have many pixels, we have a high pixel camera, but they never ask that what is the quality of the pixels, especially in mobile phones. The quality of the pixels, the size of the pixels, because of the small size of the mobile phones, is not as good as the quality of the pixels in a DSLR camera. But the amazing thing in the technology of DSLRs has been that cameras are being able to accommodate more and more pixels on the same surface. Now, let us discuss about the size of the sensors, because in terms of photography there is something called the full frame sensor. We also hear something like the APS sensor. Now, the new word which is very common is called micro four thirds sensors. These are all differentiation of sensors on their sizes. As I said earlier, the bigger the sensor, the more the surface and better resolution, but it has also to do with what is the threshold of our eye. Our eye also sees detail only to a certain extent. So, the new technology believers are also making cameras where the sensor is smaller, therefore cheaper, but they say that our eye cannot see beyond details of a certain color range. Nevertheless, I will talk about the sensor size. The standard sensor size in a DSLR when the DSLR came was an APS sensor. The size of an APS sensor is about 24 mm by 17 mm. This is about 25% smaller than a full frame sensor. When DSLRs came, it was very difficult and expensive to make what is called a full frame sensor. The name full frame sensor comes from the size of the film frame. Full frame means the 35 mm film size. When we were shooting on film, our film negative, the standard film negative size was 36 mm by 24 mm. When digital came, it was not possible technically, or it was very expensive technically, to make a sensor of the size of the film, which was 36 mm by 24 mm. So, they made what is called the APS size sensor, which is, as I mentioned earlier, which was a sensor which was about 24 by 16 mm. The results here were not bad, they were particularly good. Yes, as time improved, the silicon chip which made the sensor could be made bigger, and slowly with time they also made the full frame sensor. the full frame sensor has better resolution, better quality, but the most of the industry is also using the APS sensor. Similarly, a new thing that is a standard in cameras like Panasonic and Fuji is called micro four thirds. Here the sensor is even smaller than the APS sensor. The size of the sensor goes down to 17 by 13 millimeter. So, the micro four third sensor is actually technically smaller than the APS sensor, but now with the new technology they are claiming to have results as good or as sharp as the APS sensor. So, many sensors will keep on changing. Digital is still in its infancy in some ways. Standardization has not happened. Sensor sizes for various camera manufacturers are still according to their convenience. In fact, it would be better to know the APS sensor of a Nikon is slightly bigger than the APS sensor of Canon. So, even the two big manufacturers who have a big market share do not have a standard for size for their sensors. Sensors, the sharpness has improved, as I mentioned, their pixel size and their pixel performance has improved. Therefore, the picture in a digital camera is improving every day. It is important to mention that with photography, the camera which has the sensor which is doing the processing and creating the image, converting it into digital information, storing it in the form of digital information, is doing half the job. The other half of the job is done on a computer. The computer has now taken the place of what used to be the dark room in the film era. After all, even in the film era, you used to click the picture, but to process the picture, to make it visible, you had to take the film roll in a dark chamber and process it, and processing techniques gave tints, colors, shades, brightnesses to the image. You could manipulate all that. Now, that processing of the quality of the image, its resolution, its sharpness, its color tones is managed not in a dark room, but on a computer with the help of a specialized computer softwares which process the image. The image itself is stored in many formats. A format is like a language. You have to write a certain language in the form of a digital information which can be read by the computer. So, you may be familiar with names like JPEG and RAW. JPEG is the most common of the languages in which digital information is written, the image information is written. JPEG is a universal software because it is like a language, it is like the English language which can be read anywhere. Just imagine if it was a language which could be read only by few people, like there are many languages in the world, then only few people, specialists, would be needed to read that. RAW is like that. RAW is a language which is only readable by very specialized software which the company itself makes and does not share. So, a Nikon RAW cannot be opened on a Canon RAW, or all computers need to have those readers, whereas a JPEG is provided by everyone and can be read anywhere. Yet RAW is supposed to be superior to JPEG. Why? RAW is uncompressed information. RAW has all information. Therefore, when you have all information, then you can manipulate or juggle around with that information and give shift in the color temperature, in the brightness, many things you can play around with. RAW is also known as the digital negative. The original is always there. There is something that you can play around with and change the texture, the information around the image, and therefore improve its color, texture, many things. JPEG is a compressed information. Compressed information means JPEG throws away a lot of information right in the beginning, which it feels is not necessary. But by throwing away the information, well, there are two advantages. Yes, the disadvantage is you lose information, but the advantage is that the file size becomes smaller. Therefore, it is more easily transportable, sent online, scattered all over the world, read everywhere, and yet it can also be very agreeably manipulated. Yes, you cannot manipulate it or change things as much as you can do in RAW, but still you can change information, improve the brightness, desaturate an image, add color, do many more things. Yes, but you have to be careful. If you do it many times and continue doing it, then the image will degrade very fast, because it is already a compressed image, already information has been removed. In RAW nothing like this happens, but RAW is a difficult information to transport, because the file size, the basic information is so much that it takes time to, or is virtually impossible to send online from one place to another. So, people still, high end professionals use RAW in their images, because they know that they have to do a lot of changes or improvements to the image. It may be required primarily for printing, so lots of other things will come into it, the size will matter, whereas for specially for using the information online, transmitting it fast, JPEG is much used. JPEG itself has many grades to it. You can have high quality JPEG, medium quality JPEG, and a low quality JPEG. When we use it JPEG on the phone, it is a low quality JPEG, because the display itself, the phone screen is so small. The moment you will transfer it on a big screen, you will start seeing harsh edges, which is actually the few pixels that have made the image, and they show up. So, one needs to choose what quality image one wants to use. It can be high quality JPEG, it can be medium quality JPEG. If you are using information only and you are sure that you are not going to print it, it is always advisable that the screen image is displayed more easily and does not require such high resolution. You can easily shoot medium quality JPEG or high quality JPEG and or low quality JPEG according to your discretion. The digital camera revolutionized photography further. The biggest advantage of digital photography was its instantaneousness. One could immediately click and see the results. One was not required to go into a dark room to process a film. The result was immediately available to us. I could pick up the camera, look at it, go take a picture and immediately review the picture. You had the result in front of you. The camera itself gave us a screen where a large display immediately happened. So, more and more this was very useful for further democratization of photography. Earlier, even amateurs were scared to use the camera, because they did not know what the result would be. They had to wait 2-3 days. Now people started using photography as a leisure activity, because they could immediately correct themselves, play around with aperture and shutter and see the results. You had to transfer the information on the computer to see a bigger picture, but immediately you had things where you could change. Any DSLR has many things to give you control over its functions. Right over here there is a menu. The menu itself gives you an entry into seeing what information you can control. There are shortcuts to the menu also. In these buttons you can control the white balance, to control the color cast, you can control the quality of the image that you are recording. I mentioned JPEG and RAW. By pressing the quality, you can choose what quality of JPEG you want, high, low or normal, or if you want to RAW, which kind of RAW would you like, the RAW with the JPEG image or without the JPEG image. Similarly, you can control the ISO. As you know, the biggest advantage, I feel the leap that happened with digital was you could change the ISO with every frame. earlier film photography, the whole film roll was of one sensitivity. Either it was low sensitive film or high sensitive film, and there were rarely very high sensitive films. Now on the same click you can go from 100 ISO to 200 ISO to 1600 ISO to 3200 ISO and even higher. So as the situation changes, even in dark situations one can immediately pump up or jack up the ISO and take pictures very comfortably handheld. This was not at all possible in the analog or the film era, because the whole film had one sensitivity. If it was a 100 ISO film, the whole film roll you had to take out the 100 ISO, finish it, take it out to put a 400 ISO film. For me, the biggest advantage that digital did was to make, naturally at the first, as I mentioned, was to give you an immediate review of the image. You immediately saw what image you had taken, but also you immediately changed according to the light condition the ISO of the film. Any digital camera has many functions to give you manipulation in terms of changing the image. You can change, as I said, the ISO, but you can also change the quality, the white balance, you can change the shutter speed, you can, and everything comes on display with the camera. And the image itself, as I mentioned earlier, is stored in slots in something called a SD card. The SD card here is a small compact card which stores, here it is an 8 GB card, which means in any JPEG normal image it can easily store 1000 or over 1000 images. You can also check, you get a counter to see what number of images, how many number of images that are left. Apart from the SD card, there are other cards also. A much popular card is also called a compact flash card or a CF card. The Canon camera uses a compact flash card. Compact flash cards are considered sturdier and they have higher capacity to record many more images. So the many kinds of drives or storage devices have now come. You can also directly shoot on your computer by connecting it. There are now Wi-Fi facilities, there are GPS facilities. Photojournalists use a digital camera to shoot here and record right across with the help of a modem into their offices, so that information can easily and quickly be sent wherever it is required to. So speaking about the camera itself, the camera is equipped to record the image, but as mentioned earlier, the digital darkroom is the place which is now on one's laptop or a computer, where you use the software to manipulate or further improve the image. Any photo editing software like Adobe Photoshop has very basic tools to improve the exposure, to improve brightness, to desaturate or make an image black and white. You can remove certain unwanted portions. Cropping is a very important tool. These are all tools which were also done in the darkroom manually by earlier film photographers. So such many tools itself allow you to go further ahead in photography. You can immediately write text on your image, you can immediately brighten or kind of change the brightness of the background or the foreground if there is a very high contrast. So what I am trying to say is, to be complete in digital photography, you have to give equal emphasis to a photo imaging software, and any photographer, apart from being sharp at the skill of clicking a picture on his camera, has to be good at using a software of his choice. Today I talked about the coming of the digital camera, the transition from analog photography to the digital, the whole idea of what the camera itself is, the sensor as the heart of the camera, the medium which records the image and stores it in the digital cards, the conversion of the information as a digital signal. It also was further elaborated in the form of telling that what can be done to the image after it has been clicked on the camera and transferred onto a computer, where it can be manipulated, changed and further improved. All this information is useful for any photography student and creates a larger picture about the whole digital scenario. I hope you enjoyed the program. Thank you very much.